Okay, so today's exercise I want to look at encapsulating data inside of a class. So access modifiers should be used for everything that is declared inside of a class. And the general rule is that variables or instance variables are made private. So I'm going to go to this fraction class and make the numerator and denominator private. The toString is already public, and I want to make the multiply method public as well. So by making it public, I'm making it available to everybody, and by making it private, I'm saying this here is available only inside of the class. Alright, so by making these changes, remember that I have my fraction test, which also creates a fraction and tries to access the numerator and denominator. And this then gives me a compile error because f1.numerator, numerator has private access, so I'm not allowed to access it inside of the fraction test. If I were to move this main inside of the class itself, I should not have a problem with that. So if I'm only compiling the fraction class, this compiles this fine. So it's only not available when you're outside of this class. Okay, let's remove this because I don't want the main to be sitting in here. And this here is as a safeguard. I don't want someone to just be able to set the denominator to a 0. I want to have some control of what happens when somebody tries to change my data. So a fraction wants to control its own data. So instead of being able to access the data or the variables inside of the class directly, I have to create methods, mutator methods or setter methods that will allow somebody to change it. So I can create a public method. When it's a mutator, it doesn't return anything, and I want to set the numerator, and I will just have it for a value, and the numerator is set equal to the value that is passed in. Now similarly, I want to do something for a denominator. So again, it's a setter method or a mutator. So it is doesn't have a return. Set denominator. In this case, what I want to do is I want to make sure that that value is not 0. So if it's not 0, I can use it. If it is 0, I really should have some kind of an error. For this case, I will just print an error message and otherwise do nothing. And later we'll look at better ways of dealing with these kinds of errors. System.out.println. Denominator of 0 is not valid. So now I've given a way of changing the data with some control, where I, the class itself, make sure that the data inside of the class is always consistent, or at least it's always valid with respect to each other. So in the test, instead of doing just setting it directly, I'm going to have to do a set numerator and pass it the value 1. And similarly with set denominator, I can pass it the value 2. Let's first try to set it to 0 to show that this will actually give me an error and it won't do anything. And let's just remove this. So I can compile everything again, and it all compiles, and I can run the test. So what happens when the first time I'm trying to set it to a 0, it sets it to not valid, and the denominator stayed at 1. And when I try to set it to 2, the fraction value was changed. So this is a way to design your classes such that the data, that the class itself or the object itself has control over its own data to make sure that it's valid. As a general rule of thumb, instance variables are always set to private. And you provide accessors and mutators to manipulate the objects.